Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. This is episode 37, where Louis and Ann speak with George Allen, president of Acreage Holdings. There are a few companies out there that have disrupted the cannabis industry quite like Acreage Holdings. Back in April, Acreage announced that former Republican Speaker of the House and staunch conservative John Boehner joined their board, along with former Governor of Massachusetts Bill Weld. This felt like an inflection point in the industry, perhaps even the tipping point of when it became cool for politicians to embrace this business. Acreage is also fresh off a just announced $119 million round of funding, the largest private financing deal in the cannabis industry to date. One last note before Ann and Louis jump into it, Acreage Holdings is a client of KCSA. Don't sit back, lean forward. Now, onto the conversation.
George, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us. Let's jump right in. Back in April, you guys made incredible news when you announced that former Speaker of the House and Republican John Boehner joined the board of Acreage Holdings. Some people thought it was a money grab by the speaker. Others saw it as a really important shift in the business, in the industry of cannabis. Can you talk a little bit about what he's been doing with Acreage since joining the board?
Well, I got to say, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be on your show. Having John Boehner join the board and Bill Weld join the board, both of them have had a transformative impact on our business. They, at its baseline value, I think, when I had approached a couple of the employees around here and suggested that we're going to be bringing on John Boehner to the board, I think they looked at me like my head was on backwards, and we did get a fair amount of that response, because if you have been living the cannabis dream for a long time, it almost feels like we're defecting to the other side by bringing John onto the board. The reality is it's much more of a pragmatic approach, which is at its baseline, he is a person who represents a significant swath of the American population that you have to bring along if you're going to make cannabis mainstream in the United States. So from our standpoint, what we had hoped to accomplish, and I think for the most part we had by bringing him on, is the demonstration that cannabis mainstream moment has come. Go ahead.
I think, though, a lot of people said it was really surprising that he did this, because he had been on the record saying, "No way, never. I will never support cannabis." So how did you flip him? Like, can you talk a little bit about that process of, where you kind of grabbed him by the collar or the arm and said, "Follow me," and to kind of take us through his education a little bit?
Well,
I hope it wasn't that violent.
There was actually very little physical contact during the thing. It was, I will say, first of all, Kevin and Kevin's story is very compelling in terms of how he had built the business here.
We're talking Kevin Murphy, right?
Kevin Murphy, that's right, our founder. When Kevin and I sat down with John Boehner and went through with him, I think he was really astounded at some of the facts that we brought to bear. And he was open-minded about it. And I was really impressed with how open-minded he was. And when we talked a fair amount about the veterans who are using cannabis, I think that was largely what had sealed the deal for him, seeing the fact that, 22% of veterans are using cannabis, despite the fact that the VA pays for a mountain of pills. They're using cannabis instead to treat their PTSD, and that helped a lot. And I think, the fact that he was a never cannabis guy, bringing him over to being open-minded about cannabis, That's exactly what has to happen to make cannabis mainstream. And we've seen that. Everybody's got a story. They've got a story about how they were surprised when they wanted to go work at Acreage Holdings. They talked to their mom, and their mom, instead of screaming at them, says, "Yeah, you go get them. That sounds amazing." We've got countless stories of that around here. It's just surprising to see how fast the winds of change have blown.
So you recently announced a nearly $120 million funding round, and congrats! It's the biggest one in the history of U.S. cannabis. Can you tell us about the process of how you raised that much money for a cannabis company?
Well, I tell you what, it's no different than raising money for everything else. You've got to go to a lot of meetings, take a lot of rejection. Tell the same story over and over again. What was really fun, though, is the moment you hear the personal stories that people give back to you about their experiences with cannabis and how they've watched somebody's life be fundamentally changed with some of the medical attributes of the plant. So I would say, our process, very similar to everyone else's. We didn't get a lot of traction with institutional investors in the end. We spent a lot of time with institutional investors, all of which who I think were very eager to invest in the space. Ultimately, it got lost in legal somewhere where they were very nervous about their banking relationships and whatnot. And while they were figuring that out, and we were in the process of figuring that out with a number of institutional investors, while they were figuring that out, the high net worth individuals who we had solicited really just filled the books, and we realized we were done before we could even consider the institutional investors who were at the table. And
wow,
we had a hard cap
really,
on the round. We hit it.
Oh, okay. So, and it was really the high net worth investors was it mostly high net worth? What other players were involved?
Yeah, we've got some single purpose or dedicated venture fund firms that were dedicated to cannabis or narrow type investment mandates. So we did have a fair spectrum of that, but for the most part, individuals and family offices were our staple investor in the round.
So you guys are an American-based company, and can you talk a little bit about the makeup of the investor base? Did you raise it all from Americans? Were there Canadians involved? Did you go to Australia? I mean, can you talk a little bit about like where these investors came from?
So we had investor participation from all corners of the world. I mean, all corners of the world. I mean that we had a fair amount of diligence calls with Middle East.
Were they reaching out to you? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but how are you reaching these corners of the earth?
It's a good question. It's all about how you network. This stuff people look for. The story got told about what we were putting together, which, in long or short version was basically the combination of a new class of professionalism in the cannabis space combined with the largest footprint in the United States, and combined with the type of leadership that we had around us from the board level. That story kind of rippled around the earth among investors who are looking to find ways to differentiate how they invest in a low interest rate environment. This type of story of $100 billion industry waking up overnight tends to get their attention.
And I assume the John Boehner announcement helped a lot.
Yeah, to say the least. I mean, really, it helped. It helped because there's a marginal class of investor out there who was on the fence about the risks around investing, and I think that marginal class of investor who saw the opportunity but was on the fence about investing. When they saw John Boehner sort of invest with his personal credibility and his reputation, I think that helped tip a fair number of people into, okay, it's time to break out the checkbook and get involved.
So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the business of Acreage specifically, and the kind of unique business model you guys have. You initially invest in, but you don't operate the licenses that you targeted. Can you talk about being an owner operator and what are some of the lessons that you've learned from actually growing, processing, and dispensing that you can share?
So the genesis of the business was early on. To get these licenses, you really needed a tremendous amount of local connectivity. And so what Kevin had built long before I got here was a network of people who had that local connectivity in various markets to go and get these licenses and these state concessions. Kevin owned a minority piece for the most part in all of those licenses, and had always shared the vision to take those assets, combine them into one operating business, and take it public. The lesson that I think we learned in doing that was, with all of the, in some respects, with all of the effort we had put forth into creating a brand, creating a business, creating a story, and a leadership team that was successful in relaying that message, even with all of that, it was still a tremendous lift to negotiate all of those roll-ups, and that took us a fair amount of time to get complete, which I must say that if I ever had to do that again, I'm not sure I would take it as a challenge, but we got past it, and I'm really grateful for the participation we have from all of our minority investors who are really, they've sunk their careers and their blood, sweat, and tears and investments into the space, and we're not going to let them down.
So, you talk about your minority investment partners and that you're rolling them up, and the price of these licenses it's a dynamic market, right? It's almost like there's an arbitrage going on between an initial purchaser, them building up the value of the license, and then somebody like you coming in and buying them up. Do you think the valuations of licenses have hit a peak? Are they still accelerating? I mean, are you guys being really, really smart and buying low, assuming that they're going to continue to appreciate in value? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that side of the business?
It's like anything else, supply and demand. So on the demand side, I don't think we've started to see the full amount of capital that's going to pursue this opportunity, and that is only going to continue. Right now, you have a very small proportion of the capital stack, which is high net worth and individual investors, who are capable of participating, and that's only going to increase. Right? We know, with the exception of maybe some sort of calamitous adverse event, from a policy standpoint, that's only going to continue. From a supply standpoint, we have a dialogue going with regulators about how they want these programs to roll out in a way where they can control them. They want fewer throats to choke in terms of the ability to make sure that you're compliant with the rules.
Wait! I thought this wasn't a physical industry. You didn't grab Boehner, and now you're saying these guys want to choke your throat?
Oh, sometimes with the regulators, you can imagine they get pretty animated because they're the ones who deal with the calls. They're going to get the phone call from the governor when the packaging isn't compliant, and or somebody gets into a product that they shouldn't, and that's a responsibility we all have.
So you guys own most of your licenses in limited license states, right? Like New Jersey, for example, and you recently bought a dispensary in New Jersey. Do you think that you guys are going to expand also into the more open states like Nevada and California, Oregon, and if you do, how does that impact on your business model of buying licenses where it's limited so that they're more valuable and you're able to get a larger share of the market?
That's a great question, and we think a lot about that. Just to clarify, we actually partnered in New Jersey with a non-for-profit, but we have a very good relationship with them. such that we have a relationship between our two businesses where we get a lot of the economic benefit from investing in the business. But specifically to your question about how do we do it, look, what we look for in this business are choke points where we can invest into something that has an either naturally occurring or a statutorily preserved barrier to entry. And so there are 200 dispensaries in Portland, Oregon, and that you could argue is a little bit less of a naturally occurring barrier to entry than the fact that there are only 6 ATCs in the entire state of New Jersey. But that said, we want to be a nationwide brand. We want the ability to communicate nationwide footprint to customers and to create a consistent experience across the board. So we will be going into different markets. Our preference is to pick the places where we see some fundamental barrier to entry.
So New Jersey had just announced, I think to the surprise of at least a couple people, that they're opening up and accepting, I think, is it a half a dozen new licenses? Are you guys going to compete for those?
Well, we probably can't just because of the relationship we have in New Jersey, although I will say that we've got a good relationship there in the state, and I'm very excited about New Jersey as a cannabis market. It's got a slow start. Chris Christie had his thumb on the industry for a long period of time.
No. He had his head up his ass.
Your words.
I'm happy to say it. I'll say it again. He had his head up his ass.
Yeah, so, it was. I mean, he was obstructionist to say the least about the industry. And look, let's be clear. Like now, with Phil Murphy, it's very clear that not only is he a believer in cannabis, but he's a believer in the cannabis solving a bit of the fiscal issue in that state. So the agenda has changed. Here's what is amazing about cannabis. Cannabis actually is not a limited quantity or a zero-sum market. And this is one of the fascinating things that we've looked at by looking at a tremendous amount of data here at Acreage. What that means is the fact that they're expanding the program in that state, the fact that they're expanding the number of licensees in that state, yes, you can argue, and there are, I'm sure, a bunch of guys who are licking their wounds because they liked it when there was an exclusive market and it was only them. But let's be honest, fellas, that ain't going to last for a long time. And the true reality is that consumers respond to cannabis based on how prevalent it is in their jurisdiction. You look at Arizona and Michigan, 2 states where medical cannabis rivals in scale and per capita consumption what you see in California. The reason for it is because of the number of dispensaries at large in those states. And so what that means is the proliferation of the business, the visibility of the business, all are factors in creating a tipping point in terms of acceptability within those jurisdictions, and that's definitely what we're seeing. So we actually take a counterpoint on this one. We're very friendly towards expansion of the programs within the states. We welcome that with open arms. We do ask to have an open dialogue with the regulators about how they structure it, not because we're trying to keep people out of it, but because we're trying to keep the morons out of it.
Well, and also to keep it from staying in the black market. I mean, I think most of the legitimate companies like yours are looking to take it out of the illicit market and move it into the light, so that it's the products are tested, you know what you're getting, there's taxes collected, people are stopping selling illegally on the street.
100%.
It only makes sense. So can we? I want to stay on the politics side of this a little bit, because you guys you brought in Governor Weld, who is the former vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. You have former Speaker of the House John Boehner, who is a Republican. The 2 loudest voices right now, other than there are guys like Cory Booker, and I can't dismiss him. And personally, I'm a huge fan of his, or Elizabeth Warren. But it really seems like the Republicans have been able to change the conversation about cannabis legally. Do you see this as continuing, that the Republicans are going to adopt this and make this their issue? Or do you think that Boehner and Weld are more of, outliers in the party? And if this isn't something that then you don't have to answer. Moving on.
Look, what I would say is that everybody spends a lot of time sort of, conjecting on this topic, right? Because it really is a big question. Do we need a change in Pennsylvania Avenue in order for cannabis to become legal? I don't believe we do, or actually decriminalized. I don't believe that we do. I actually don't believe that we do at all, because I think that it's base level. The whole point of politics is to reflect the will of the people. That just kind of goes back to the earliest notions. But what I will say is we are starting to see Republican participation on the cannabis agenda that is really profound on certain topics. Banking reform, we've seen a fair amount of participation. We've seen veterans participation, or veterans support for cannabis. So I don't know which one of the parties is going to lead the charge. I think it's really hard to say. Except to say that right now, as constructed, you really don't go anywhere without an R next to your name on the vote. So, but I would say I think we are 50-50 right now as to whether or not this thing tips over this year. I'd give it 50-50 odds of whether or not it happens. And really, the big catalyst there is what issues take hold in the midterm elections.
This being rescheduling or descheduling?
I would say descheduling.
Descheduling.
Yeah. That's right. And I think just the general, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the form of either banking reform or which is effectively descheduling, or an actual bill to deschedule.
We have a running joke here that it'll probably happen on like November 3rd.
No, October. I think it's October 15th.
The October surprise.
It's October 15th. Yeah, totally.
And if it catches, and I think that the Republicans could grab hold of this. And
it's a popular issue. Popular opinion is on the side of cannabis, right?
If he does it, absolutely. I will shoot myself in the head. If he steals this issue from the Democrats, it's going to kill me.
Well, the Democrats are totally giving it up, but
listen, don't be too bummed out. Don't be too. We're all going to make one giant step forward there. I think the bigger issue is whether or not we can get a couple of these chuckleheads to actually start using the product, because I think it might change their outlook.
So I got to ask. John Boehner is well known for smoking cigarettes. Have you ever thought of just slipping him a pre-rolled in a pack of cigs and just say, "Hey, let's see what happens"? We're gonna have to let our board relationship mature a little bit before I think that one happens. I'm not like, here, John, try this chocolate.
There may be a breach of governance in there. I don't know, but my general counsel probably has a view. But he's a good guy. I don't think he uses cannabis, but I think he knows enough people that do, and he's heard a fair amount of stories.
So can we talk about the suits? Suits like you guys are coming in and buying up, the historically, I guess mom and pop shops. And there's the argument that, a bunch of rich old white guys are going to make the money, leaving the people that this industry was built on, especially people of color, kind of behind and sitting in jail cells for nonviolent crimes. What would you say to those people, and what are you guys doing from a social justice standpoint?
Well, listen, social justice is a big issue for us, and we were actually working with a couple of the more proactive regulators in the space, thinking about how we collectively can come up with a solution where we can help finance minority participation in the industry. But let's be clear, historically, it might not have been Wall Street who was investing in this industry, but they were wearing suits. For the most part, they were lawyers' suits. And what we've seen in terms of who were the early entrants in this space, it's especially in the East Coast markets where these licenses were given out to a chosen few. This isn't a question about about migration from the sort of mom and pop story to one of large corporate America. It's really a question of migrating into an investment vehicle where other people can participate in the upside. And thus far, the market had been reserved for a very select number of participants who were able to voice influence substantial enough to get one of these licenses. So yes, the industry is getting more professionalized. Like, let's be honest, isn't that better for everyone? You want you want culpability, you want responsibility, you want to be able to attribute products to people who have reputations and financial risk on the line. So it is for the better in the industry. That said, we've climbed the hill basically from people who have been in this, have been doing this for a long time and have been advocating for legalization of cannabis. And those are people that we definitely, we salute in terms of the work that they've done. We try to work with them to the extent we can. This has been a long slog getting into this spot.
So we talked a few minutes ago about how quickly the pace of change in the industry is accelerating. It seems like every day something is happening at a state level or a federal level that gives you hope that this is going to change. And you said you think 50-50 by the end of the year. I think it's higher than that. I think that my guess is October that the president deschedules. He's going to need a win before the midterms, and given the way that this industry polls, 90+% favor medicinal access, 70+% now favor adult use access. So let's go under the assumption that sometime this year we get a descheduling event. So what does day one of legal pot look like for Acreage, and then more importantly, what does day 2000, 5-6 years down the line look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. We think about that a lot. Look, our view around here is that that represents a massive sea change for us and the rest of the industry, because the moment that the moment that you can get decriminalized, then you're just going to see the industry is going to fill up with all the would-be participants who don't let $100 billion industries get fed to other people. Like, in this space, it's very obviously alcohol, tobacco, and pharma, and they've all been sidelined. They've, to some lesser or greater extent, they have board committees set up and are looking at this space and are all trying to.
Constellation invested in Canopy, right? And
exactly.
Twice. They put a direct equity investment in, and then they participated in a debt deal. So do you think that what will happen is relatively quickly that the bigger players, the you guys, the GTIs are going to get bought? Or are you going to have hopefully have enough time to develop and then maybe eat each other and then be big enough to survive on your own?
Well, who knows? But look, we're building a business here that I hope that can endure for a long period of time. And what we view is the time between now and then is the opportunity for us to build a wall or a moat around the business, such that when they come in with their capital, we've got the assets to protect ourselves. And so, yes, I think our business is going to have a tremendous appeal when that happens. That said, I think our business is being built by a group of passionate people who want to see it run as an independent company for as long as possible. But I will say this, the reason why we are so active right now from an acquisition standpoint and deploying capital is because the writing is on the wall about what's going to happen to asset prices once this sea change occurs. It's just pretty fundamental physics of the ecosystem that what comes in is going to go out, and a lot of money is going to be coming into the space.
So let's speak about that for a second. So in the announcement that you guys issued and all the coverage around the equity raise, you also mentioned that you guys were going to do an RTO up in Canada, and the CSE has clearly become the home for U.S. companies looking to access the capital markets. Do you think that the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange are sitting there just salivating and pissed off at the White House for having them lose all the listing fees. The banks are losing all of the banking fees. I mean, how much pressure do you think Wall Street is now putting on the Justice Department, the White House, to get their act together and deschedule?
I don't. What I'd say is right now, do I think that they're pissed off? No, I think that they see the writing on the wall, and if it goes on for much longer, then you know, the volumes that are going to exist. I mean, what they care about are trading volumes, and the volumes that are going to exist off of their footprint for what is going to become the best growth opportunity in commerce, this decade. When they see that, when the volumes increase as they will over the next year or so, then I think it's going to be a real question for them. I don't think they've pushed back that hard politically because they're not sure, in addition to the regulatory issues that exist, I don't think that you can convince the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ that the public companies that exist in cannabis today, for U.S. operators, really constitute the maturity and the professionalism that they're seeking. That's going to change. We are going to change that. A couple of our competitors and peers are going to change that. And when that changes and when the volume occurs, then you're going to see them start making phone calls. And so from our standpoint, we could wait around for that. A couple of our competitors have said pretty vocally that they are going to wait around doing that. We're not. We're going to go list in Canada in a way that I think will allow us structurally to move into the U.S. when we can.
So let's talk about you from a personal standpoint, if we can. You were the chief investment officer at Cambridge Information Group, which is an IT-focused investment group. How, if at all, did that prepare you for your work in the cannabis industry? And are all of your colleagues like scratching their heads, or are they like, "Hey, dude, I want in"?
So first of all, when we turn it to personal discussion, I feel like I should drop an octave or something. And it's just like we now got into the really personal. So
now we're going to take it down a bit.
We're going to take it down a little bit here.
This is
Jerry
the Green
Maguire
Rush
interview,
after dark.
Right? What I was in private equity for 10 years, one form or another. In a firm for 10 years, and then I did it for another 4 or 5 years after that. And most recently, the CIO job that I was in got me exposure to the industry because I was very lucky to work for an extremely progressive investor who was interested in looking at the space. And so I started looking at it, and I came across Kevin and just really became enamored with the opportunity over here, and eventually over a couple meals over the course of about a year, decided that I should do this with him. And it's been unbelievably thrilling for me. I'm just the ride of a lifetime. I will never repeat the experience of working here in my entire career, the joy that I've had in just building a team around such an awesome vision and mission. It's been a blast, a total blast. And it's my friends and my network. It happened almost overnight. Though, what the heck are you thinking?
You're brilliant.
Now I get just bombarded, and they're playing the Canadian stocks, and they think I know about the Canadian stocks, which I'm like, do you really think that's how I spend my day? Combing through the filings of Canadian stocks, like to be honest.
Well, that's Alan Brockstein's job.
Right. And so no, I don't.
And Vivian Azer, right? Yeah.
So it's been great. It's been great. I mean, one of the best things around here for me personally has just been building a team and building an awesome team, which is just, it's been so much fun. So this is an industry that revolves around the plant. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship with it? Do you have a relationship with the plant? Because some of the CEOs and the presidents and the chair people that we've spoken with are like, nah, I never use it. And others are like, yeah, I have a great relationship with it. It's so funny. I feel like it's de rigueur to say that you believe in the healing powers of the plant and you don't use it. And I always look at that and I'm saying, yeah, really? I mean, really? Is that really the way you feel? But no, I got exposed to cannabis pretty young. I've never done any other drug, but I've always thought that cannabis was pretty remarkable. I would say in general, I try to limit my usage of it, but I will say that I have used it for a pretty extended period of time since before I should have. And
you used it when it was weed or pot or marijuana. Now that it's cannabis,
I used it when I went to boarding school, and some kid next to me, probably scraped something off of someone's shoe and said it was marijuana. But yes, I mean that's the gist of it. But I actually happen to think, and I subscribe to this notion. I actually think that cannabis, in many ways, has a role to play in making the world a better place.
Amen.
I love that. So now it's actually a great place to go to Puff Puff Pass. So we ask all of our guests, give us 2 things you love about the industry and 1 thing you absolutely hate about the industry. Go.
Oh, my favorite thing is the diversity of people who use cannabis. Favorite moment I've ever had in cannabis was being at a dispensary in upstate Connecticut, watching a trooper roll in his squad car, walk out, come in, give his medical card. So people in the industry.
Wow, that's so cool.
That's definitely one of my favorites. Just the explosive growth and just the fact that this industry is a blank canvas, right? And as the biggest player in the industry, we get to actually put the ink on the canvas. That's awesome.
Yeah, you're writing history.
Yeah. Yes. The one thing I hate about the industry is definitely banking. It sucks. It's a nightmare. And I'm almost 100% certain that by going public, I'm going to lose my own checking account, which I have no idea how I'm going to handle that. But if you guys want to get paid in Bitcoin, at Starbucks, let me know, because it may be happening soon.
Yeah, actually, we have to disclose George is a client, and by far one of the coolest guys that we get to work with on a daily basis.
Oh, thanks. That makes me feel great. But you guys got to upgrade who you hang out with.
Okay. Those were great, George. Thank you so much, man. This was an awesome conversation. And we are really excited to continue to work with you guys and to see how Acreage continues to grow.
We're having a blast with you guys as well. And thanks for everything.
Thanks again to our guest, George Allen, president of Acreage Holdings. Check them out at acreageholdings.com and on Twitter at Acreage Cannabis. Thanks so much again for listening. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and we would love it if you gave us a rating and a review. If you have a comment or a question, we would love to hear from you. Check us out at KCSA_cannabis on both Twitter and Instagram, or drop us an email at greenrush@kcsa.com. That's
one take, Shay. One take.
Wait, why are we doing it at the same time? Shouldn't we just do one?
No, that was how we're supposed to do it. It's supposed to be us talking together.
Well, you're also typing as I'm reading, which is really annoying.
It's because you're my little jar of joy.